Well, hello, my friends, and welcome once again to the Romano Report podcast. Today is Wednesday, September 17th, and there's a lot to talk about. I'm sure I won't get to all of it today, but I'll give it a shot. Beginning, this Charlie Kirk stuff. I don't know about you, but I am so unbelievably fed up with all of it. I am sick of all of it. The way that MAGA is exploiting this man's death. Of course, this is not surprising in any way. I would expect nothing less. I am sort of maybe a little bit surprised, although I'm not that surprised anymore either, but a little bit surprised by how much the media is overblowing this as well. Probably because they don't want to be attacked by MAGA and Donald Trump for not covering it the way they want them to cover it. So we are just getting inundated with this Charlie Kirk stuff. And you know, they are making this man out to be something that he never was. The way that they talk about him. I'm just waiting for them to tell us that they have, 3 confirmed miracles performed by Charlie Kirk during his life so that they can make him a saint. I mean, that's where they're headed with all this. It's ridiculous. It's absolute. And of course, they're using it for the same reason they use everything. They use it for grifting. Oh man, are they grifting off of this. Even his widow is getting in on the grifting action. The body wasn't even cold and she's already sending out fundraising emails and texts. Unbelievable. Unfreaking believable. And did you see that video? I wish I had, maybe in another video. That video of her that she posted of herself all across social media. She was laying on top of his dead body in the casket, stroking his hand, kissing his hand, with her really gaudy, big-ass gold rings on. She's got a very expensive lifestyle. She's got to keep the grift going. Those rings ain't cheap. Anyways, it's so friggin' distasteful. Disgusting, really. And the disgusting spectacle of seeing Air Force Two, the vice president's plane, being used to transport his body. Who else would get that treatment? Not those kids who were murdered at school on the same day Charlie Kirk was murdered over in Colorado. Notice the media doesn't talk about that. You got to search long and hard to find any mention of that story. But I don't know if you heard this, but the killer in that case killed himself. Turns out he was a right-winger. Yeah, but really, that's not covered. Nobody's going to know that. All we're going to know is what they tell us about Charlie Kirk and the guy who killed him and what his motivations were. And it doesn't really matter what comes out about it. The narrative is set. That this was a left-winger who killed Charlie Kirk because he didn't like Charlie Kirk's opinions, and so he killed him. And therefore, because one guy, who they say is a left-winger, killed Charlie Kirk, that means that everyone on the left is guilty. And because everyone on the left is guilty of political violence, that justifies Donald Trump going after American citizens who he disagrees with and trying to prosecute them for speech in which they engage and which he doesn't like. And you had his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, the last couple of days coming out talking about hate speech is different than free speech. She said there's free speech and then there's hate speech. And we're going to go after people who engage in hate speech. Now, I posted a video yesterday on the Romano Report, the main channel, talking about this and explaining how something that I'm sure most of you already know, that hate speech isn't a thing. It's not a legal thing. Right? There is no hate speech carve out for the First Amendment. There's no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. Hate speech is free speech. You cannot prosecute someone for hate speech. We have no hate speech laws that Trump and Pam Bondi can use to prosecute their political opponents. That's not a thing. And this is what I'm saying. We don't know how much of what Donald Trump and Pam Bondi and all of these authoritarians, we don't know how much of what they say is real, are things that they actually intend to do to us, or whether they're just performative. They're just essentially, the spoken version of Twitter shitposting to own the libs. So when they talk about going after their political opponents for hate speech, are they serious about that? Or is this just more performative bullshit for the cult? Because the cult loves this stuff, right? The same people who demanded that bakeries not be forced to bake cakes for gay weddings because of free speech. And by the way, the courts have ruled in their favor on that. These people now want to use the power of the federal government to throw their political opponents in jail over their free speech. And by the way, there is a case that I also talked about the other day where an Office Depot employee was fired because some people came in wanting flyers printed for a Charlie Kirk vigil. And the employee refused to print them, saying they're the political propaganda. That employee was fired, but that's, of course, not good enough for the MAGA cult. They want to use that. So they blow it all up. This is the kind of shit they run with on Fox News. They covered it on Fox News. They probably, talk about it 25 times a day on Fox News. I don't know, because I won't do that to myself. I'll watch clips of Fox News. And as much as I love you guys and I want to report on what these lunatics are saying over there on Fox News, I can't do that to myself. All right, I couldn't do it. Anyway, so Pam Bondi was on Fox News she was on with Sean Hannity talking about prosecuting. It wasn't very clear who she'd be prosecuting, but prosecuting somebody in that whole Office Depot thing, whether it's Office Depot themselves, management, or this fired employee. But she made it clear that she said this is a crime. If you have to print those flyers, and if you don't, it's a crime. That's exactly the same situation as the bakery and the cake for the gay wedding. And they lost their damn minds over that. And they eventually won on that. And the Supreme Court has ruled that a bakery, any business, is not required to further your speech. And they have a right to refuse something on the basis of the message. So a bakery opposed to gay marriage doesn't have to bake you a cake for your gay wedding. It's the same exact issue here. So not only is what the employee did there at Office Depot not a crime, it is, according to the Supreme Court, a freedom of speech issue itself. It's constitutionally protected First Amendment activity. You do not have to engage in speech or facilitate someone else's expression if you disagree with it. Now, Office Depot, this wasn't a decision by Office Depot. This was apparently one employee. But anyway, they're losing their damn minds over it. And they want to prosecute Office Depot or the employee over this. But you know, this is all performative. I have no doubt that Pam Bondi and Donald Trump would love to be able to throw people in prison for their speech. Now, we haven't yet come to a point, at least they haven't tried this yet, to prosecute somebody for something that's not a crime. See, because when you're going to prosecute someone, when you're going to charge them, indict them, you have to cite a statute. And the charging document has to track the language of the statute. It has to contain all the elements contained in the statute for the crime. There is no crime of hate speech. There is no crime that would apply in the Office Depot situation. That's why this is almost certainly completely performative. Because there's nothing they can do. Now, if they didn't have to, in order to prosecute someone, go to court, then they probably would do it. But you still, at least as far as I know in this country, you still, if you're going to convict someone of a crime, you still have to charge them in a court of law and prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And get a conviction from a jury of their peers, a unanimous conviction. At least so far as I understand, we have not gotten rid of that part of the Constitution yet. Maybe they're working on it. Maybe Donald Trump is crafting an executive order as we speak. And if he is, I would tell you that executive order is, obviously unconstitutional and it carries no weight and all that. But who the hell knows? I mean, if he just wrote an executive order getting rid of jury trials in this country, who knows? Who knows what the Supreme Court would do? That's how fucked up things are here in this country. Anyway, let me hit a couple of things here. Here is a Truth Social bleat from the Orange Buffoon talking about a $15 billion defamation and libel lawsuit he filed against the New York Times. He doesn't even know these legal terms he's using. He says, "Today I have the great honor of bringing a $15 billion defamation and libel lawsuit against the New York Times." That's actually fucking redundant. That's fucking redundant. This idiot doesn't even know what he's talking about. You would think that someone who is as litigious as he is would understand these basic concepts, but he does not. Anyway, I am not going to nauseate you by reading this entire, pile of bullshit right here. I will just tell you that he is suing the New York Times for $15 billion, essentially because he doesn't like their reporting. Because they report things about him that he doesn't like. Because they don't kiss his ass. That's why. So he's suing them. Now, of course, he's going to go around suing people left and right, especially these media companies, because so many pathetic media companies have already folded, like ABC, like CBS. ABC folded when Donald Trump sued them over comments George Stephanopoulos made about Donald Trump's being found liable for sexual abuse and defamation against E. Jean Carroll. George Stephanopoulos had said that he had been found liable for rape. Technically, in New York, it's not called rape, it's called sexual abuse. In other jurisdictions, it is called rape. And the judge in the case said that what Donald Trump did and was found liable for by a unanimous jury is commonly referred to as rape. There's not a chance in hell he would have won that lawsuit, yet ABC settled. Same thing with CBS, where he sued 60 Minutes because he didn't like the interview they did with Kamala Harris during the campaign. So he sued CBS and 60 Minutes. And because Sherry Redstone wanted a merger of the parent company Paramount to go through with whatever the frig company owns it now, this was essentially a bribe. She settled with Donald Trump to bribe him, so because the merger needed federal approval. So anyway, time and time again, these people settle completely frivolous lawsuits with this guy. So of course he's going to do this more. And so now he's doing this against the New York Times. It is a completely frivolous lawsuit. These lawyers who are bringing these cases should be disbarred. They should absolutely be disbarred. You know, part of the reason Trump is able to do all this is because he has lawyers who will file these lawsuits on his behalf. If the profession of which I am a member, and the profession which it currently disgusts the living shit out of me, the legal profession, policed its own profession better than they do, as they have every right and authority to do, they could put an end to this crap now. If they would discipline lawyers who file frivolous lawsuits. Rules of professional conduct prohibit lawyers from filing frivolous lawsuits. And so they could discipline these lawyers, but they don't. Anyway, I don't want to get off on that tangent. But I had a thought the other day when I heard about this lawsuit. Hold on a sec. By the way, as always, my little friend here, Baby Bluey, and his message. If you haven't gotten your mug yet, and you want one, you can get it. Links are on my YouTube page. Actually, it's not on this YouTube page. I haven't put them up on this page yet. But if you go over to the Romano Report, the main channel, you will find links to the Romano Report shop so you can get your own. I've also got some more stuff coming. I want to get some stuff up for Christmas, including this one. This guy, I'm trying to turn this one into some merchandise. If you can't tell what this is a picture of a hunched over Donald Trump with the caption, "I shit myself," which he probably did in this picture here. Anyway, I had a thought when I heard about this lawsuit, and that is, a lot of these people and companies, organizations that Donald Trump sues for defamation should countersue him for defamation. And I don't know why the fuck they don't. Let me explain. The president has immunity from lawsuits. This was established, this is Supreme Court precedent. It was, there's different Supreme Court precedent on it. The one from last summer had to do with immunity from criminal lawsuits, but this would be a civil lawsuit. So I'm talking about civil lawsuits here. He also has, the president also has immunity from civil lawsuits for, actions taken as, official duties of the president, essentially. You can't sue the president for doing his job. Not in his personal capacity, right? But when Donald Trump, for example, in this New York Times lawsuit, he is suing the New York Times in his personal capacity, right? He is saying, you lied about me, Donald Trump, the person. I'm suing you for it. He's not suing as president. It's not the office of the president suing the New York Times. It's Donald J. Trump suing the New York Times. And it's very clearly in his personal capacity, right? So, every time Donald Trump sues one of these people or entities, like here with the New York Times, he announces the lawsuit and he proceeds to defame them. He says horrible things about them. Let me read just a little of this. I honestly didn't even read this whole thing because I'm sick of torturing myself. But let's take a look at what he says. Today I have the great honor of blah, 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 blah. New York Times, one of the worst and most degenerate newspapers in the history of our country, becoming a virtual mouthpiece for the radical left Democratic Party. I view it as the single largest illegal campaign contribution ever. Their endorsement of Kamala Harris was actually put dead center on the front page. The Time has engaged in decades-long method of lying about your favorite president, blah, 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 blah. All right, so he goes on, to bash the New York Times. Now, these things are not true that he says about the New York Times. They are lies. And these lies, coming from a prominent person like Donald Trump, could hurt their business. Donald Trump knows these things aren't true, and he says it to hurt them. That is defamation. So now we go back to the issue. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that it is defamation. Of course, if there was a lawsuit, they'd argue about whether or not it is defamation. But let's just, for argument's sake, assume that it's defamation. Then the question becomes, well, is Trump immune from a lawsuit here for defamation? Because he is president. I say, hell no, he's not immune. Because he filed this lawsuit against the New York Times in his personal capacity. So that is, by admission, his own admission. Anything he says about the New York Times related to this whole thing is him in his personal capacity, not as president. So when he's defaming them here in announcing his lawsuit being filed in his personal capacity, then anything he's saying about them is also in his personal capacity. So why the fuck does the New York Times not sue his fat orange ass? And he does this every time he sues media organizations or anybody. Even when he doesn't sue people, he's attacking them. And you can at least attempt to make the argument that it's in his personal capacity, and then let him argue, file the damn lawsuit. Then let him argue to the court that I'm immune because I'm president, and this wasn't in my personal capacity, this was in my official capacity as president, and then let the court rule on it. And if the court dismisses it as he's immune, fine. But you should at least try. And I know they're not going to do that because everyone's afraid of this guy. But I'm just saying, we talk all the time. People ask all the time, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? Well, there are things that certain, we collectively, the American people who are subject to this tyranny, what can we do? Well, I explain a lot about things that can be done. But this is one of the things that can be done too. Why is it that only he gets to sue every damn body? Why don't people start suing him? So many of the things that he does, and especially says, cannot arguably, it's really not, it's not, you can't argue with a straight face that he's doing it in his official capacity as president of the United States. But at least give it a shot. Sue him. Sue him. Make the argument. Anyway, what else do I have here for you? Here's another thing. How much time do I got? I really don't have too much time here. Okay, we'll see. Here's an executive order or executive action or a proclamation or whatever you want to call this. You might have heard about this. Restoring law and order in Memphis. Again, I'm not going to read this whole fucking thing. I don't need to. I've already friggin' read it. I don't want to bore you with it. But you might have heard that last week, I think he was on, state media, Fox News, and he was talking about how, the next city we're going into is Memphis. You notice how he skipped over Chicago. Remember? What was it, 2 weeks ago? He put out that tweet, injecting himself into a scene from Apocalypse Now, threatening Chicago with war, that he was going to unleash the Department of War on the city of Chicago. But he didn't, did he? No, he tacoed the fuck out of that. You know why? 2 reasons. One, the law is clearly against him being able to do that without the request of the state. And the state, so that's one. The law is clearly not on his side. Every court so far that has looked at this has shot him down. Most recently, they're in California. Washington, D.C. has also filed a lawsuit against him here. Of course, he's on firmer footing in Washington because it's a federal district. But anyway, you still have the Posse Comitatus Act, which is not, Washington, D.C. is not exempt from the Posse Comitatus Act. Anyway, so that's a lawsuit that had been filed. But he clearly has no authority to use the military in a state without the request of the governor, or unless certain circumstances, like an actual insurrection against the federal government, is taking place in that state. No such circumstance exists in Illinois. And not only has Illinois not requested the federal government to send the troops in, but the governor and the mayor of Chicago made very clear that they don't need the help and they don't want the help, and Pritzker told Trump, stay the hell out of Chicago. So you have the law clearly against him, and you have elected officials in Illinois, both the governor and the mayor of Chicago, standing up to this bully and saying, hell no. And they aren't backing down, and so Trump chickened the fuck out, because that's what he does. He's a bully. When you stand up to bullies, they back down more often than not. And that's what he did here. And instead, he's going over to Memphis. Why? Because, it's been reported widely that Memphis, leads the country in murders on a per capita basis. Because Trump was trying to say, oh, Washington, D.C. is so horrible and Chicago is so horrible. And then people started reporting, hey, how about these cities in red states, like Memphis in Tennessee, which is way worse than either one of those two states, and you're not going there. And so finally he was like, oh, okay, I'll go in there. But the difference is that he has a friendly red state, and they agreed to let Trump go in. So Trump's going into Memphis with the military, or so he would have you believe. This is largely performative. This executive order, whatever the hell this is, presidential memoranda, that's what it is, it's a memoranda, is largely performative, because if you go on to read it, all it does is establish a federal state task force to come up with ways to reduce crime in Memphis. That's it. Now he's going on Fox News and telling the cult that he's sending the military into Memphis, but it ain't true. Now, he may, and there won't be any legal problem with him doing so, because it would be at the request of the governor, because they're going to do what Trump wants. So he will legally be able to do that if it happens, but it's probably not even going to happen. This is probably all it's going to be, this performative memo, creating a task force. But he'll go around saying that he's sending the military into Memphis, when really all it is it's a joint state federal task force. Anyway, it's just a friggin' joke. But the point is, that I was making earlier, is you never know which things they say they're going to do or threaten to do, which of these things they're serious about, and which of these things are merely performative to entertain the cult, or to distract from the fact that he's in the damn Epstein files, and that we want to know what he did to children. Doesn't want to talk about that, so he's going to put out some bullshit that he's invading Memphis, when he's not. But he is doing so much that is horrible, and he threatens to do so much that is horrible, and he is certainly capable of doing the most horrible things. You never know what threats he is serious about and what things he's not, and it's just performative. So we kind of have to deal with all of them. But he throws so much shit at us on a daily basis, I can't even get to all of it. Anyway, okay, so that's the Memphis thing. What else we have here? Oh, this is all too real. Here is another post by Trump on Truth Social. This morning on my orders, this was, what day did this come out? How do you even find the date on these fucking bleats? I don't know. It was in the last couple days. This morning on my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a second kinetic strike against positively identified extraordinarily violent drug trafficking cartels and narco-terrorists. Okay, so he killed some more people on a boat 1,500 miles away. Another small boat that he says contained drug traffickers, drug trafficking cartels, and narco-terrorists. And so he killed them all. Now, this is murder. That's what we call it when it's an let's say it's a crime. Murder is a specific illegal killing. Not all illegal killings are murders. You have negligent homicide, you got manslaughter, you got different levels of murder. Let's just say it's a homicide. I believe it is murder, though, so fuck that. Murder. This is murder. Because unless you have lawful, even as President of the United States, unless you have lawful authority to use deadly force against anyone, and then unless you have lawful authority to kill someone, then it's illegal. And this is illegal because he had no lawful authority here. I'm sorry. I'm kind of distracted by something's going on there. My apologies. Anyway, he had no lawful authority here. In order for the president to use deadly force, he must either be acting pursuant to authorization from Congress, or he must be acting in the immediate defense of the country. Okay, so in this case, when he kills a bunch of people in a boat 1,500 miles away in the Caribbean, he had no lawful authority from Congress. Congress didn't authorize shit, so that's out. So the only thing that could possibly make this legal is if he was acting in the immediate self-defense of the nation. A tiny little fucking boat with a little outboard motor on it, 1,500 miles away. How could they even have enough gas on that fucking boat to reach the United States? None of this makes sense. Anyway, little boat with an outboard on it, maybe 5 people. How the hell is that a threat? A clear and present danger, a self-defense threat to the United States of America? It's not. So killing those people is illegal. And the fact that this was done intentionally, it was planned out, that's murder. So we have the President of the United States murdering people. I don't give a fuck if they're cartel members or narco-terrorists. There's no narco-terrorist exception in our Constitution or our laws for the president to kill people. If he alone declares that they're terrorists or narco-terrorists or drug traffickers or whatever, that doesn't empower him to kill them. You know, we've been dealing with these kinds of people for a long time. We know how to arrest them, right? We know how to interdict and arrest. We don't need to murder these people, and we don't know who the hell's on these boats. Anyway, this is a serious issue. And if, God willing, Democrats get control of the House of Representatives and hopefully both, they need to investigate the shit out of this. This is an impeachable offense all day long. Not only that, it's probably a criminal offense all day long. This man should be investigated, impeached, removed, and fucking prosecuted. And again, just like with the civil lawsuit, don't assume automatically that he's immune from prosecution because he was president when he committed these crimes. Let the friggin' courts decide that. Impeach him, remove him, prosecute him, and then let him go to court and argue, no, this indictment should be dismissed because I have presidential immunity. Fine, if the courts then want to dismiss the case, let them. But let's not preemptively say, he's got immunity, we won't even bother trying to hold him accountable. Let's not give this shit up in advance. All right, I'm going to have to pause this for a minute. This might be the end of the podcast, or I might come back and record a little more and slap this on at the end. I guess you're just going to have to wait and find out. Well, surprise, I'm back. Which most of you probably had figured out because you could tell that the video wasn't at the end yet. And if that's the case, I gotta be honest with you, your powers of deduction, remarkable. Anyway, I've got a couple things that I want to hit real quick before I get to a piece here that I want to read about the destruction of the United States that we're witnessing in real time. Anyway, real quick here, you know, the Trump economy is just humming along, ain't it? Here's an article: grocery prices spike to highest level in 3 years in major blow to Trump. Now, didn't so many people tell us they were voting for Donald Trump because of the price of groceries? Well, I know for a lot of people that was just bullshit. That's just the excuse. They were really voting for him because of the racism and the sexism and the, you know, he owns the libs and all that kind of crap. But honestly, there were people who voted for Donald Trump. If there was any single issue, for people who really actually voted on issues, if there was any single issue that was the most important for them in voting for Donald Trump, it was the economy. Some people argue that it was immigration. I believe it was the economy. That's always the most important issue to Americans when they vote for president. Most of the time, that's a stupid reason to vote for president. But in this case, it was a pretty important reason. But not for the people, but not for the reasons that the people who voted for Donald Trump voted for him. You know, there's not... Generally speaking, there's not a lot that a president can do to affect the overall economy. But in the case of Donald Trump, that's not true, because we've seen that his policies directly tanked the economy because he implemented these tariffs. See, normally a president can't go ahead and just slap tariffs on the entire world. You know, when you have a rule of law, you know, a president can't do that by himself. So if we were operating under the rule of law, then the ability of the president to either improve or destroy the economy in 6-7 months is really, really limited. A president doesn't really have the power to do that if we're following the law. But since we don't follow the law anymore, and the president's going to do all kinds of things he has no legal authority to do, well then, yeah, then he can affect the economy in a really negative way. So they voted for him to improve the economy. Of course, the exact opposite is happening. But, you know, when you vote for a guy who promises to be an authoritarian and who is also simultaneously the stupidest person ever to be president, doesn't know shit about virtually anything, well then this is the kind of thing you get. Which is why we tried to warn people that voting for Donald Trump was a disastrous mistake, but they don't fucking listen. Anyway, so here you have the price of groceries, the highest it has been in the last 3 years, because, you know, inflation had been tamed. Prices were still high, but the inflation rate had come down dramatically toward the end of the Biden administration. Virtually every economic number was heading in the right direction when Donald Trump won. And the American people thought, a lot of them thought that the economy had never been worse. In fact, it was the strongest economy in the world at the time. This is just how stupid and disconnected the American people are from reality. Anyway, here's another one here. I just realized that this whole time I've been talking, I had that article up. I thought I had put it back on me. Sorry, I deprived you of like 5 minutes of looking at my beautiful face. I'm sorry. My deepest apologies for that. Anyway, back to this second article here. Long-term unemployment at post-pandemic high, straining workers and the economy. So the unemployment rate is the highest it has been basically in the last 4 years. Again, everything is getting worse under Donald Trump. So good job to all you geniuses who thought Donald Trump would make things better. Honestly, how fucking stupid do you have to be? Okay, done with that. Now I want to get to this article here. This is an article or piece written by a British woman. This appeared in the Telegraph originally. And the title of this piece is "The American Dream is Ending in a Psychotic Breakdown." And it is hard to disagree with that statement. So let me read this. "We got him," said the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox. making an unqualified judgment of guilt on the man who had just been apprehended. Will they bother with a trial at all? And if so, how could any jury be unprejudiced? Has Tyler Robinson, who is still being described officially as a suspect, already confessed and made it clear that he will plead guilty? By the way, this was, written, what's today? The 17th. This was written on the 13th. President Trump has expressed a wish for him to be given the death penalty. Has there been, or will there be, a psychiatric examination to establish that the accused, who has not even been charged when the governor held his triumphant press conference, is fit to be held responsible for his actions? To British ears, accustomed to the principle of innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, this was all pretty shocking. And even by American standards, it was rather exceptional. But these are exceptional times. This is no longer about a particular crime. It is a test of nerve for the governing class. Can rationality and moral decency be restored to the public square? Or are we entering an era of lynch mobs and licensed mass hysteria from which there is no escape? Is this how the American dream ends? With a mass psychotic breakdown? An epidemic of insanity in which the freedoms and virtues that were intended to guarantee a great modern nation are turned into murderous parodies of their original intentions? Maybe this was an historic experiment that was doomed from the start. Perhaps the whole project was naively idealistic and misconceived. The idea that you can create a unified, stable nation-state from displaced people who have chosen to leave behind their historic roots and the precious sense of belonging to a place, however terrible and dangerous that place may have been. The founding intentions were magnificent. This was to be the age of reason. Or, let me read that again. This was to be the age of reason incarnate, where every individual would be granted the rights to self-determination and personal liberty, and be guaranteed those rights by a written contract, the Constitution, with a government whose powers were strictly constrained and delineated. It was the embodiment of the Enlightenment dream of human potential, which relied on the principle of rational debate and the participation of the population in a permanent, open discussion about their own future. There is real doubt now, the anxiety is quite palpable, about whether the concept can survive a 21st century reality in which threats of death and retribution have become the common currency of public discussion. It would be a mistake to think that this latest eruption of homicidal psychopathy has come from nowhere with no warning. The United States is a dangerously volatile country. There has always been a palpable element of derangement in its social order. It has a record of assassinations and attempted assassinations, and a perennial problem that violent crime, which is masked... Let me try that again. And a perennial problem with violent crime which is matched by almost no other first world country. But what is happening now feels different, apocalyptic, and inexorable. And the reason it cannot be stopped is that the people, both the population at large and those who are supposed to be in charge, do not want it to stop, whatever they may claim. If they sincerely wanted to put an end to it, they could do so in a moment of reasonable consensus. But they have consistently resisted any attempt to enforce standards or control on the virulent social media activity which is undermining the real freedoms they revere. So the tide of what once have been called extremism. Let me read that again. So the tide of what would once have been called extremism, the incitement of violence and the perpetration of blind hatred, are now the accepted currency of political discourse. This is much more psychologically and socially complicated than it might appear. The chronic dissatisfaction, which is the other side of individual freedom, has long been a neurotic fact of American life. If you are promised every opportunity to improve yourself, to succeed, to go beyond what might have been the limitations of your birth, and you do not or cannot live up to those expectations, then what? The anger and frustration that comes with that disappointment was always a danger to the dream of aspiration which is supposed to be your birthright. Discontent and resentment are built into the national way of life because they are the inevitable counterparts of success and achievement. Not everybody can win in this frantic race, and if you are one of the losers, or even one of the less spectacular winners, it is deemed to be your own fault. You did not try hard enough, or worse, you threw away the chances you were given. The work ethic of Americans and the judgmental attitudes that it breeds often strike British people as ruthless, just as the condescending compassion that is shown to those who do not succeed in Britain is surprising to Americans who find the complacency and resignation of those who make no attempt to escape their poverty of their origins deeply shocking. This is a profound difference that is quite difficult for the nations of old Europe to grasp. They may feel that they share the democratic spirit and the intentions of the United States, but in truth they are entirely different in their social assumptions. The 18th century French revolutionaries who expressed their support for American rebels against British monarchic rule may have assumed that they were fighting for the same republican cause. But they were not creating a country out of nothing, with an entirely new population of incoming peoples. The French may have rejected their monarchy, but they were still recognizably themselves, an identifiable nationality with a sense of their own shared history. Tragically, it seems that the very notions that were intended to be the foundations of this model of an enlightened society are contributing to its downfall. The sacred right to free speech has been poisoned by malign actors who use the new social media made possible by technological innovations which burst upon the scene without any political consideration to foment violent hatred. Is it possible to distinguish the legitimate uses of freedom from the dangerous, irresponsible ones? We may be about to find out. What do you think about that? There's a lot in there. I don't really want to get into it now, and I frankly don't have the time, but I don't know if we're going to be able to save ourselves from this. I really don't. It is possible. It is absolutely possible. We could end this nightmare now. If the people rose up to the point that we put the fear of God in these elected representatives of the people in Congress and demanded that Donald Trump be impeached and removed from office, that could happen in short order. But there's no groundswell sufficient to put the fear of God in those members of Congress who protect this man. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. Maybe if we overwhelmingly elect Democrats in the midterms next year, and maybe if we still are recognizable as a democratic republic by that point in time, and if the Democrats we elect in the midterms have the courage and the strength to impeach and remove Donald Trump from office, then maybe it's possible. But that's a whole hell of a lot of ifs, none of which I have any confidence in. But it's possible that we could save ourselves from this. We are in this situation, and that's the problem. The ultimate problem here is that we are in this situation because this is what the American people chose. And not enough of them have woken up and realized the mistake that they made, the terrible, terrible mistake that they made. Will enough of them ever wake up? Will the people who were asleep in November 2024 and didn't bother to vote at all, will they wake up? Will they realize what's at stake here? I don't know. They could. It's possible. I don't have a lot of faith that they will. This could all end now. The tools exist to deal with this. The founders of this country, those who wrote the Constitution, knew that someone like Donald Trump could come to power. This wasn't a surprise to them. They anticipated it. They gave us all the tools we needed to deal with him. I think there are things they didn't anticipate, like political parties and how political parties would usurp the Constitution to a great degree. You know, they separated out the powers of the government into 3 branches, and they expected that each branch would jealously guard their own power and would act as a check on the others. But that has not happened. It certainly hasn't happened in the age of Trump, because parties have become more important than the different branches of government. And so when you have 2 branches of government, and really in this case 3 branches of government, controlled by the same party, the constitutional separation of powers breaks down. It doesn't work anymore. Members of Congress are loyal to their party, not to their branch of government. So the Congress is a Congress in name only right now. They're not doing what they're supposed to do under this Constitution. Anyway, I could go on and on about that. My point is, is the American dream ending in a psychotic breakdown? Certainly looks like it. Will we put on the brakes? Will we reverse course? Will we do what's necessary to save ourselves? Or will we end in a psychotic breakdown? I don't know. I'm going to keep fighting. But honestly, if I had to bet, I'd bet on psychotic breakdown. I think that's the much more likely outcome. Doesn't mean I'm not going to keep on doing everything I can to avoid this being our end. But I'm afraid it will be. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.